my brother, and I admire him so much, I said I'd tell him this story. I don't think I've told it formally even to my own kids. So,
Mark said he didn't talk about it.
no, I didn't talk about it through the years. I think the story that he wanted me to relate to you was my experiences on a PT boat in the Mediterranean. I got into the Navy early in World War before Pearl Harbor and spent the first half of the war on a destroyer out in Guadalcanal area in the New Hebrides. And then I came back and went to PT boat school. Tutu and I were married at that point. And then I went overseas in the Mediterranean in a PT boat squadron, and I was had my own PT boat. I was a skipper, and because I had been in the Navy at that point for some time, I was the senior boat skipper of our squadron. And the incident or events that they wanted me to tell you about occurred in the invasion of southern France, where the U.S. Navy supported the landings of the troops in southern France. And I was on a PT boat at that point, and we were patrolling offshore to be sure that there would be no German E-boats or submarines or anything coming in. And I got orders to report to the admiral in charge of the fleet there. And so we reported to him and got an assignment on D-Day +1 to go from east of Marseille over to a little port to the west of Marseille where it was a fuel depot. And what they wanted to know, the admiral and really the American Army that had landed the day before, wanted to know as to whether that little port west of Marseille, the landings were all east of Marseille, whether that little port was in Free French hands or in German hands, because it was a fuel depot. And they wanted to get it in American hands as soon as possible so that they could bring fuel in to supply the tanks and all the vehicles that were going to go up the Rhone Valley and join with the Normandy landing. So anyway, we got the assignment to go in there to find that out. And they told us, the Admiral's staff told us that there was a minefield off of this little port, and but they showed us on a chart where the mines were supposed to have been, there was a channel where there were no mines, so you could get into the port and out again. So we went in, and on the way in we got fired on, but it wasn't, the artillery was a long distance away and didn't get close to us and didn't bother us much. But we had to go into this little port, not knowing whether we were going to get blasted out of the water or whether we were going to be welcomed with open arms, depending who held the port. And when we got in close enough so that we could see with binoculars, we saw the Free French flag flying, so we were very pleased and relieved. And so we went in there and we got a royal reception because they were glad to be under the oppression of the Nazis, and the mayor came down and women and children with bouquets and flowers. We were trying to, at that point, I had the radio man trying to get the word back to the headquarters, back to the admiral who was on a ship offshore, that it was in Free French hands, but we couldn't get through because of radio disturbance of some kind. So finally we decided we had to go back out to sea to get this message out. And the mayor told us, well, you know, there's a minefield out there. And we said, yes, we knew there was a minefield there. And he said, well, wouldn't you like to take a couple of our pilots who know where the minefield is and go back out? We said, sure, that'd be fine. So we went back out. And when we got clear of the harbor, we went up to speed and going along, and had been going about 10 minutes when we hit a mine. And the after a third of the boat disappeared with 5 men and a 40mm gun, and the boat came to a screeching halt, of course, and was way down in the stern. And so I ordered them to put on an anchor, and we anchored, and we sat there. And when the mine had hit, we had about 5 of the crew that didn't know what was happening, and they jumped overboard. So we threw a rubber life raft over, and they climbed into the rubber life raft, and they didn't have any paddle, and they started drifting away towards the shore, and we knew that in that direction it was a minefield. So what had to be done, so I told the crew, the remaining of the crew that was there, and incidentally we had a French officer aboard so that he could converse with the French when they went in, and another officer from the Admiral's staff, so it wasn't only PT boat people. But I told them to get all the lines that they could together and tie them together, and so then I dove overboard and was taking a line over this to this boat that was drifting away. And today I can say to myself, why the hell was I going to dive into the middle of a minefield? But in those circumstances you don't think twice. That's the thing that has to be done, so you do it. And eventually they ran out of rope, and I still couldn't get there, so I was out there paddling, trying to take this rope out, and they kept putting life jackets on the rope so it wouldn't sink to the bottom every 20, 30 feet. So I shouted back, well, just go down below and pull out all the electrical wire you can and tie it on. So they got a whole bunch of electric wire. Oh, the long and the short of it was we got the boat and we pulled it back, and didn't think much more about it. Make a long story short, eventually they sent a boat out from the shore where we had been, because they had seen the explosion in the distance, and that boat came out with a couple of other pilots aboard it. It was a fishing boat with an engine in it. Of course, we were completely out of it. I mean, we had no more had a radio or anything at all. It was all. And the boat was still afloat and was going to stay afloat, we determined. It wasn't going to sink. So we were anchored there in the middle of the minefield. So they came out, and while they were there, we were writing out an airplane came flying off. The Admiral was on a heavy cruiser, and they had an airplane on the stern. And this airplane came around and flew over us and saw us there, and it landed. And so the French lieutenant commander and I were madly getting a note together to give to the pilot of the airplane so that he could take it back to the Admiral and tell him that everything was fine and that the port was in free French hands. They could bring in the minesweepers. And about that time, a second boat came out, and it hit a mine and blew up in the air. And the pilot of the airplane thought that somebody was shooting at him from the shore, so he took off before he got the message. So we were sitting there, and we decided our job was to get that message through. And so the French commander and I took that little inflatable boat, and we paddled ashore into a little French town, not the one that we'd been in before, a little fishing village. And we got there just at dusk, and as we were trying to make our way into the harbor, which was across the whole harbor was a floating net that had landmines all over the top of it. And we had to unpeel to get in there, and if there was a light in the town. So we knew there was somebody there, but the streets were deserted. And we paraded around through the town and found a Free French flag on a pole. And then as we were walking through the streets, I noticed in the backyard of one of those houses, there was some laundry. We went over and felt the laundry, and it was wet. And so we knew somebody was in that house. So my French compatriot went over and pounded on the door, and it took him 3 or 4 minutes before people would answer him. but he found that the town had been deserted for about 3 or 4 days because there was a big radar station nearby, and the Allies were bombing that radio station, so they took all the women and children out of the town. Well, we had some other escapades during that night, and finally got back to the town. We couldn't get our message through, and we had a few hours sleep in the morning. And then the next morning we went out with 2 fishing boats out through that mine net and went out to the, it was a very calm day, and you could look down, you could see the mines. And we put a, so we dodged around them, and we put one boat in front of the PT boat and one boat behind, each with a line. And I stood up in the upper deck of the first boat, and we started towing in. And every time we'd see a mine, we'd scream at the guy behind us, and he'd back down, and we'd go around it. We got in through but those mines were all only about 2 or 2.5 feet below the surface, and I'd be swimming around. If I'd kicked one, it would have been the end of it for me, of course. But we got the PT boat in, and finally I got back to my squadron, etc., and I thought no more about it. Well, about 25 or 30 years later, well, I did subsequently, I didn't think it was much of an episode. I just did what I felt I should do, and to save my crew, etc. And after I got back, and before I got out of the service, I got a letter from the Secretary of the Navy that I'd been awarded the Silver Cross for this escapade, Silver Star, rather. And I thought that was rather silly because I wasn't that brave or anything. And then about 30 years later, a friend of mine said, you know, I've just been reading Samuel Eliot Morrison's 12-volume book of the history of the world too, and he said, you're a hero, you're mentioned in there. So I said, really? I had all the books, but I never read them. So he told me what page or what volume was in. I went and looked at it, and the story was all in there. Not exactly the way I remembered it, but close enough. So I thought that was kind of...
One tiny little thing I forgot, when we went into the town.
That's right.
We were on our own boat, 15 years ago.
It was this boat that we own now. Yeah, we brought it down through the Rhone River, and we went over there.
And we went into this little town and tried to find somebody who remembered the incident of the PT boat and bringing them in and helping the people and taking care of them until they could be taken back to their squadron. And our French is not at all good, and we had a very hard time getting the message across. But finally, we went up and talked to some ladies, and they were able to understand, talked a little English, and we talked to miserable French. They said that they had been evacuated, so they weren't there, but they knew about it. Well, so we went back saying a little bit disappointed because he'd hoped to find somebody who really remembered what had gone on. Well, the next morning, there was a man who came down with his French beret on to the boat, and he was the son of one of the fishermen who went out, isn't that correct?
That's right.
So that was
That
very
brought us in.
moving,
Yeah.
and very, very interesting. He had gone with his father out to help the PT boat that was blown up. Great.
And then the other thing that was nice about it, we went there once before that too, when we were driving up to
On our way to
Genoa, Italy, and they told us, and there was a memorial to the people in the town, those towns that had died, and on that memorial they had the names of the 4 American crew members of the PT-555 there, and I took a bunch of pictures of it.
broken leg, he was in the rubber boat and not in the driving rubber boat.
Yeah. So, end of story.
You know, how proud I was. And then Ted and Karen showed up, and again, how proud I was. And then Katie Wolf showed up.
You can count on. The recent discovery of the remains of PT-109, John F. Kennedy's World War II patrol boat off the Solomon Islands, brought a flood of memories to others who served on those crafts and survived. Eyewitness News reporter Glenn Laxton has the story of two PT boat survivors who recalled their service during a time not to be forgotten.
Everybody would grab their guns. This would be my spot.
Roger Lenahan sits in the gun seat aboard PT-617, now on display at the battleship Cove in Fall River. It was from such a seat that he operated a 40mm gun on a PT boat that helped win World War II. When the remains of PT-109 were discovered this summer, Lenahan counted himself lucky that he'd survived and is happy to show others how sturdy and important the patrol torpedo boats were. About John F. Kennedy's boat being cut in two by a Japanese ship and the young lieutenant helping to save his crew.
He did a very heroic thing in getting any of his crew out of that mess that night. They had a tough time getting to land. And the fact that he towed this guy with the straps off of the life preserver in his mouth, and he already had problems with his back when he was doing that, but he got that guy into the beach and saved his life. And people are forgetting those things. In wartime, these crazy things can happen awful fast.
We're the one in charge.
Stanley Livingston was a PT skipper like Kennedy, and also had his boat destroyed outside southern France when it hit a mine. Like Kennedy, he also risked his life and saved his men, for which he received the Silver Star.
On the way out, we hit a mine, and the last 25 feet of the boat disappeared with a 40mm gun, and 4 of the crew.
Men were in the water surrounded by mines and could have been killed at any moment.
Some of the people got in a boat and were drifting off, and I dove in the water, swam out, and took them a line, brought them back.
With a low profile and a high speed, PT boats destroyed hundreds of enemy ships in the Pacific and European campaigns, all in seagoing craft made famous on television and in books. But at that time, 50 tons of fighting fury, and something not to be forgotten. Glenn Laxton, Eyewitness News.